Today we're joined, as you can see, through a panel discussion with three individuals. One of them is Titus Fortner, who is a recovering Cucumber user. He has worked with Cucumber and Ruby at 3 different companies and was successful in convincing 2 of those companies to make better decisions. Josh Grant, who's a test automation Pythonista, who has worked on several different test automation projects, none of which use BDD or Cucumber. He has worked with many folks who have used BDD and Cucumber. These are his stories. And myself, and I am eternally grateful to the universe that I've never had to use Cucumber at any of my previous companies. However, I work with many Cucumber customers, and I still wake up in cold sweats as a result.
All right. So let's kick it off. Let's ask the question. So Nikolay, lately you've been making a big push to advocate or educate people on Cucumber, when to use it, when not to use it. Why do you think it's so important to talk about this topic at this point in time right now?
Well, so to talk about this topic, you got to understand the roles that we have as solution architects. And the role of solution architect is very interesting because our job is to help our customers do better automation, regardless of the form that it comes in. Because if they're successful with their automation efforts, if they're successful as a customer in what they do, then we as solution architects are successful as well. So we're like codependent on the success of the customer. So our goal is to do whatever it takes, regardless of technology, regardless of tools, to help the customer be more successful. And so with that said, we kind of have seen a growing trend in the usage of Cucumber through the community. A lot of our customers use it, which we will talk about probably later, but there's definitely an appeal to it. And it's a little bit, I guess, worrisome that many of these customers that do use it usually tend to be less mature. They don't get the appropriate training that they need in order to work with Cucumber. They don't fully understand that it should be part of an entire BDD methodology where Cucumber helps to enhance the test automation process as part of the BDD. And so that's kind of why I've been talking more about it. And also really it's to question things. You know, it's just because a tool is growing in popularity and being used a lot, that's not a reason to stop questioning its validity, whether to find out, is this the right thing that we're doing here? Or why are we doing this thing? You know, as quality assurance engineers, it's kind of our job to question stuff and to challenge the beliefs. And so I think it's really important for us to be questioning, is this the right tool that we should be using? And is it solving the appropriate problems that we thought it was going to solve, but it doesn't? I mean, I'll say this. One of the main things that, for example, all of us as solution architects always question is, should we be doing so much UI automation? We're actually always encouraging our customers to do less UI automation because it's not a good thing to have too much of it. And so whether it's questioning Selenium, whether it's questioning Protractor or any kind of tools out there, it's just a matter of we have to question and see if this is the right thing for the right question that we're trying to solve.
So Josh, Nikolay was talking about why we're seeing an uptick in Cucumber usage. Why do you think that our clients are moving towards that? Why do we see that growing right now? Is there a specific appeal that moves people to gravitate towards that solution?
So I think there is. So I think the big thing with Cucumber itself is that it provides a project structure. It provides, if you will, a framework to build a test automation project, to write automated tests. I mean, BDD itself is a whole methodology, kind of like we've been saying, where teams need to communicate and kind of work together, and you have people who are testers, who are developers, who are managers, who are product owners working together. But Cucumber kind of provides a structure to write automated tests. I think a lot of teams build their own kind of in-house framework. That's what I did when I worked with Java. I used Java TestNG to WebDriver, and we just made a lot of custom stuff, a lot of custom layers, and Cucumber helps with that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Every feature file looks the same. Step definitions look the same from project to project. So it has that structure. And along with that structure, you get like managers love it because they know what to expect. There's a way to do things. There's a format to follow. And also you get nice, pretty little reports. Pretty little reports. You get beautiful reports that you can use to either as a manager to kind of monitor like progress or like how's this feature going or how's this project going. But also if you're a developer or tester, you can use it to get feedback into what you need to do next, what's broken, what's fixed, so on and so forth. So I think providing a structure, providing good reporting, which is a surprisingly difficult problem, and giving teams something they can latch onto to make BDD happen. These are, I think, the big reasons why Cucumber is so popular.
Cool. A quick question to actually both of you made me think about it. In the past, I don't know, several years or maybe even beyond that, how often have you guys sent actually some Cucumber reports to your managers to let them know the state of your system?
So not Cucumber reports, but long ago, I was in a project where we tried to build various reporting dashboards in a few different forms, and it didn't really ever work out, mainly because the managers just didn't care. They said they wanted them, they didn't want them. So yeah, I mean, there's that. But yeah. So.
Yeah, it's been same story with me. Tried to create reports in the past and tried to send them to managers. They couldn't care less. Made me realize that what they really care about is to know, is the feature working or not?
Yeah.
What about you, Titus?
Sorry, I was answering a question in Slack or in
good
the chat.
questions over there in the chat going on.
This is interactive.
Yeah,
yes.
I'm trying. Yeah, and I guess I don't know. I guess the thing that I was curious about, Josh, from the answer you just gave, is there anyone in particular you feel like is pushing this drive? Is it the managers themselves finding this, or what? I don't know. Do you have is there?
I don't know. It's a good question.
Trying to be leading a little bit.
Is there somebody? There's nobody. There's literally no one. No, but it's a good question because I don't know. I mean, so like in my case, like when I work with a lot of teams with Cucumber, like it's already been like typically it's we are using Cucumber. We're using Cucumber JVM. We're using something like that. And I don't really get the backstory for why. Okay. Yeah, but I mean, it's a really good question.
Okay, cool. Well, Titus, let me ask you a question. You have the most Cucumber experience because you actually suffered through it at different workplaces. So my question to you is, what are the drawbacks that you've seen in your implementation of Cucumber and usage of it?
Yes. So there's kind of two pieces to this. There is the aspect of the promised value that you're not getting. And then there is the things that actively make your test automation worse. And we've gotten into, we had a big Twitter back and forth while I was traveling a couple of months ago with Smart Bear and other Cucumber advocates. And it's one of those things where they sell the tool as a way to facilitate the process advantages. But they do that without discouraging, so essentially there's these things that are promised. And then when you don't get them, you're just dealing with the problems without all of the advantages. And I wish that more Cucumber advocates would acknowledge that you're not getting the advantages, you probably shouldn't be using the tool, instead of saying, oh, but you should still use the tool. So I gave a talk in Tel Aviv where I discussed 7 different things. I'm just going to touch on 2 real quick. The first is this idea of the 3 Amigos. So the 3 Amigos, you've got the business, the product, and developers and testers are all supposed to get into the room before anything is developed and agree on what done looks like and how it's supposed to work, and they're supposed to kind of do everything in parallel. The other thing that is promised is this idea of a single source of truth. So everyone agrees on what's supposed to happen. You've got your documentation and your specifications and the tests, they're all the same thing. But in reality, what we end up seeing is that you just have one Amigo. It's just the testers after the fact. Sometimes the business people will translate some of the existing test cases into Gherkin. But I rarely see this happen, and I pretty much have never seen developers participate in this process. So you're never actually getting a BDD process. You're just using Cucumber, the tool, or any other BDD tools kind of a thing. Now, business people, like the product team, wants to have their Word documents if they're old school, or any of the new fancy modeling, diagramming apps to put together the features. And so you're never going to get them to, so they have to translate whatever that is into Gherkin, or maybe the testers are translating into Gherkin. And then the testers have to translate the Gherkin into step definitions and code. And what you end up having, instead of a single source of truth, you're going to have 3 sources of truth. And there's no one verifying that those match up. So you're essentially doing 2 levels of translations without anything enforcing those translations. And so to a certain extent, you're better off just having the business people do the business things and the testers do the test things, and just kind of take a look at what each other are doing. And that's more effective than trying to force a translation layer. All right. So now on to the things that actively harm testing efforts. So just in general, you're writing additional files, there's additional overhead. Creating a test, there's just more steps to go through. There's more maintenance costs, just more things that you're doing for the same testing value. All right, and then you've got regular expressions. And this regular expressions or any pattern matching thing, no one ever says everything is better because I'm using this. This has solved more problems than it's created. I can't tell you how many times the companies I worked at, we had regular expression collisions. We had tests that weren't reporting failures because they weren't running because some setting was there and there was a collision. There's all sorts of potential issues with that where you have unintended consequences just based on how things are set up. And so the last thing, the most important thing here is tools can do like one of 3 things. They can prevent bad practices, they can discourage bad practices, or they can encourage bad practices. Preventing is hard because you need to know all of the possible use cases at the beginning, or else you're removing all the flexibility. Discouraging is the sweet spot, but it has to be the tool itself that's discouraging and not just what the experts and the consultants are saying you should be doing with the tool. In my opinion, Cucumber actively encourages bad practices because the way the tool itself is set up and the way that it encourages specifically reusable steps. So by far the biggest thing I harp on with all clients when it comes to writing maintainable tests is writing declarative instead of imperative tests. This is how you're abstracting implementation details away from the business logic. Something like this is this is the idea of, hey, we can build up a whole library of these basic steps, and then you don't need to create any new steps. You just are constantly doing this. The problem is this is not readable. Anything that changes in anything in your DOM or any of your tests, you have to go back to your feature file and change things. And maybe you have to change it in multiple places. So it's super flexible, but it gets rid of the whole point of doing this in the first place. And it makes it a significantly more less maintainable. All right, the next slide, there's another imperative example. This is one with page objects, so it's not quite as bad. But take a look that it's kind of a light page object abstraction here. You're still getting the email, the element back. You're still specifying the specific values of the username and password. And I see this a lot. If we take a look at a declarative example here, this is all I care about. I'm on the sign-in page. I sign in with valid credentials. Then I should be signed in. Now, because this is an atomic test that's testing successful login, there's no way that I can reuse these 3 steps for, like, sign in with valid credentials shouldn't be the when for other things. Pretty much you should, like, reusable steps is kind of false, because for an atomic test, you should never have a test that can only reuse other steps. You have to create new steps in order for it to be atomic. Yeah. So I guess the last thing is I'm just frustrated that I think it's a little irresponsible for tool developers to completely abdicate responsibility for how users use their tools. Like, you can say, oh, don't do that. I told people not to do that. Well, you have to follow that up with, if you're not doing this, then don't use the tool, or else you don't get you can't have it both ways. Anyway, part of my ranting, I'm trying to compress it here. All right, Nikolay, have you seen Cucumber implementations be successful? Like, either as a whole or parts of it? Like, what is it that you look at and say, this is worth doing as a Cucumber implementation?
Awesome question, Titus. And I've been following the chat, which is super awesome, with all your guys' questions. Yeah. Hit us up on Slack. We got a channel there called Cucumber-Talks. We can continue these conversations after. Someone mentioned they have had a success story, and I'm super curious to hear about it, because I've seen success stories, and I'll show you the success stories that I've seen. Both of them have come from Aslak Helsoy. He's written 2 repositories, and one of them is here. He actually just recently did this presentation on Cucumber Electron. Phenomenal presentation, phenomenal implementation. It is how Cucumber should be written, because basically he had his scenarios, and those scenarios abstracted out all of the logic, and using command line, you can decide whether you want to run those scenarios as unit tests, integration tests, or UI tests in like a cross-browser platform. That is how Cucumber BED should be done. My problem, kind of as Titus was pointing to, is why is this the only list that I have seen of successful Cucumber implementations? And when people talk to me about successful Cucumber implementations and we kind of prod further, nobody shares their code. Nobody else is out there sharing this information besides the leaders of Cucumber. And on the other hand, I've seen dozens, probably hundreds of good automation UI implementations using something like a page object pattern. Even the actor pattern, what's it called? I forget, but that other pattern. There's plenty of implementations not using Cucumber, but I've only seen 2 successful implementations using Cucumber. But the code is here. Go look at it. If I can write Cucumber tests like that, I would recommend Cucumber for everybody, because that is the way it should be done. But my problem here is, why is it so challenging? And so, anyways, besides that, when we do encounter success in Cucumber, and if we look at the repositories I've shared with you, if we look at the best practices that they recommend, they have something in common. They all use the BED methodology, meaning that they do behavior-driven development and they design the scenarios before the software is actually written. So they write the scenarios and then they implement the software, not the other way around, which is what we typically see. Typically, I mean, like 100% of the time see it. And then the other thing is, Titus already covered this really well, is doing declarative programming with your Cucumber scenarios versus imperative, right? Making sure that your scenarios are talking in terms of features versus actions on the page. And I'll show you an awesome example again. I'll keep talking about Aslak Helsoy because he's amazing, obviously an amazing developer, obviously has created something phenomenal. We've just got to figure out how to use it better. And here's one of his feature files, again, in those code repositories. You can see how there are no implementation details. It talks about the feature, how the Cucumber electron help should behave, what should be displayed whenever that happens, and so on and so forth. That is a good scenario right there versus the other imperative scenarios that Titus has shared. So enough of me talking. Let me kind of pass this off to Josh and ask him, you mentioned a bunch of cool features that the Cucumber does have, like logging, right? Creating those beautiful reports, the tags. People love tags.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. What are there alternatives to those features, or even like Cucumber itself?
Yeah. So you know, so I'm going to channel my Moira Rose, and have we done the best we can? I don't know if anyone wants
Josh does great impressions and great.
So what are some? So you can kind of think of this like there's two different ways to think about it. How can you get like the benefits of BDD without Cucumber, or how can you get the benefits of Cucumber without using Cucumber? Right? Like, what are those test automation benefits? So with BDD, we talked about the three Amigos and having those conversations and it's important to be using Cucumber and BDD to have three Amigos sessions, to have collaboration between product and dev and test, right? Like, it's important to have those conversations. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. In terms of like actual like test automation alternatives to Cucumber, so someone brought up today, I'm super happy someone brought it up in my presentation, PyTest BDD. So PyTest has this plugin called PyTest BDD. And essentially it's a plugin in PyTest that lets you write feature files and then write Cucumber style step definitions to slide into those feature files. So you can use Gherkin language, right? You can have glue code, and it's really nice in PyTest. The advantage of this, though, is that if you get to a point where you decide, I don't want to use this anymore, I don't want to use feature files, I don't want to use step definitions, you can then edit your tests. You can keep the same lines, remove the annotations, and remove the references to feature files, and then you have like a plain PyTest project. So you can kind of migrate away from Cucumber should you decide you want to, which is kind of an interesting concept. So that's something interesting that not a lot of tools have, like the ability to kind of go back and forth between BDD and Cucumber, which is neat. And what else was there? Other Cucumber. If you want to
talk to us about the readability of Cucumber, right? Are there alternatives to that?
There are, if you write good tests, so Titus mentions declarative and imperative. If you write good declarative tests, those will be readable. Those will be easily understood by testers, developers, right? You don't need some kind of special framework to just write things in a declarative way. And so that will help. Having tests that are short, autonomous, and atomic, which has been brought up probably like a dozen times today by different people, that also helps. If you have short tests that test discrete pieces of functionality, it's easy to understand. It's easy to collaborate around. So, I mean, in some ways, like you can get a lot of those nice functionalities. We also talked a little bit about reporting. So Titus made a really great point, is that there's reporting for managers and product people, like, you know, what's going on with this feature, what's going on with this release. And then there's reporting for developers, like which line broke, or like where exactly in the code is there a problem. And there's good alternatives for both, right? Like people use reporting packages like Allure or like Extent. Personally, based on my previous experience with trying to develop custom reporting, I kind of poo-poo reporting a bit. I want to know if something passes or fails. Like I'm kind of a big CI/CD advocate. But there's reporting tools out there that that people like, that are pretty, that you can show, you can kind of collaborate with. So, so yeah, those are some things those are some benefits you can get without actually using Cucumber, that Cucumber provides.
If I could just append to what Josh was kind of saying, and we kind of talked about this a little bit in the beginning, if you do it well with a CI pipeline, you don't really need reporting, to be honest. I mean, you'll get all the reporting you need from the CI pipeline, right? And your test will run automated, and then your build will either pass or fail. And that's ultimately what our managers are interested in. They don't want to see our report with 1,000 tests and 2,000 test steps. They want to see the feature pass or fail based on the test coverage. And so I actually just did a session where in 60 minutes, I wrote 2 tests and integrated them into a CI pipeline that would pass or fail from a pull request. And that's it. That's my reporting right there. I don't want to add extra complexity with any other reporting tools, because why? Why should I need to take that extra time and do all that extra work for no gain?
All right, we've just got a minute left. I had a couple things I wanted to say about switching off of Cucumber. Essentially, I never advocate people to stop doing something that they find is successful. The opportunity cost of changing things is usually greater than it's worth. One of but then again, if you're using Cucumber, in my experience, you probably aren't being successful with it. So how do you approach switching off of it? I like doing the smoke test method, where you take all of the tests that are giving you useful information and call that a smoke test, and then replace everything that's not in that smoke test in a different fashion. But I'm frequently asked by developers if they're missing something. Like, I've heard Cucumber is amazing, but it's really frustrating and I'm having all of these problems. And I think the key thing that I want to leave us with here, and I hear this over and over again, but I was successful with it. And I think most of the people who are actually successful with Cucumber probably could have been just as successful without Cucumber. Like, Cucumber is not the reason it was successful, and or you could have been more successful with less pain. Someone in the chat room was saying there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. Well, why are you doing it the hard way then? So anyway, yeah, that's, I think, pretty much we're at time now. So please reach out to us in the Slack channel. We've said a few times here. So we can definitely have more conversations and continue our opinions. And,
Well,
John, our Cucumber After Dark.
Our session is still going. Do we just talk until they cut us off?
Well, no, I have to run to another topic.
Oh, my bad.
I'm back to back here.
I have to go. But yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, we have 2 channels. Cucumber Talks in Slack, which is getting piled on with questions. Thank you all so much. That's phenomenal. We'll be in there to answer those. And then if you can't go through Slack because of VPN or whatever, hit us up on Twitter. I will post some links in the chat right now. Mine, I'll get Titus and Josh too. Hit us up there and we can talk as well. But other than that, yeah, thank you all so much for joining. We had so much fun. I hope you did as well. Yeah, and we'll talk to you guys later. Let me add Josh's GitHub, Josh's Twitter here.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It was a great time. Yeah, I hope you're enjoying it.
Yeah, thanks for listening to our nonsense. Hopefully it was nonsense.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.